Before we jump into today's episode, quick disclaimer that this podcast isn't therapy. It's educational, not individualized advice. Everyone's brain and story are different, so if you're struggling, reach out to a licensed pro who can support you.
We talk about the stuff no one dares. ADHD, sex, and the science that cares. Real talk, raw truth, and the stories that heal. Welcome to ADHD Realities with Dr. B.
All right, welcome back to ADHD Realities. So today we are going to be talking about sex drive, desire, disconnects, and the part of that conversation that has always made me feel deeply uncomfy. And when I say uncomfy, I don't mean like mildly annoyed. I mean that my whole nervous system has been thinking more along the lines of like, this framework is off. And this has been something I've been experiencing for years. And it took me a very long time to name the why. And it's honestly like one of those things where once you then see it, you can't unsee it. And the real truth is that I've never felt comfy cozy with the way desire is talked about in heterosexual relationships specifically. I'm talking about here. Not because men are wrong for wanting sex or women are right for wanting less, if that's the dynamic. Not because desire in and of itself is bad, but because the way we frame this concept of like mismatch in mainstream conversations and also even in therapy spaces, it's not neutral. It pretends to be fucking neutral, but it's not. And so the reason people then get kind of heated about it is because it's touching something bigger than libido. It's touching power, expectation, entitlement. And people do not like when I name that part out loud. They just don't. And before I go down the spiral of education and thought and reflection and all of this good stuff, I just want to say out loud really quick before you get any further in this, I am not saying that there's something wrong with having a high sex drive. There's nothing wrong with sex being a priority. There's nothing wrong with a partner saying, hey, this is important to me. I miss you. I want us, right? That's not manipulative. That's not coercive. That's not predatory. That's a normal relational desire and a normal relational request. But where that conversation begins to fall apart is when we confuse desire with access. Because listen, wanting sex does not automatically translate to being owed sex. And that shouldn't be controversial. That is literally the fucking foundation of consent. But culturally, we have built a whole relationship narrative where higher desire seems to get like positioned as the need, and then the lower or fluctuating desire gets positioned as then the problem. And then the entire relationship becomes organized around trying to fix the person who isn't providing access at the frequency the other person wants. And, that framing is exactly what has always bothered me. Because when we talk about this higher drive versus lower drive, we're already then kind of like smuggling in the values, right? Higher drive tends to get normalized as a healthy, urgent, and very legitimate state, while the lower drive tends to then get treated like a deficit. And then therapy often enters the chat because the higher desire partner is distressed, which valid. Distress is distress. But the conclusion becomes there's an issue. And then what people usually mean is there's an issue because I'm not getting the access I expect. Not because the relationship is unsafe or that the couple can't communicate, not because someone is being mistreated, but because the frequency doesn't match what one partner assumed would be ongoing. So I want to offer a different frame, a frame I wish was more common in couples therapy and around this conversation because desire is information. It's not a demand signal. It is not a receipt that entitles you to access. It's information, right? Information about your body, your attachment needs, maybe your stress level, your energy, your context, your hormones, your nervous system state, your stimulation level, your sense of connection. Okay. Information still requires regulation. It still requires reality testing, consent, collaboration. And so this is kind of now where the ADHD lens matters because my work is all ADHD centered, if you didn't know this already. And when we look at ADHD brains, again, we're all different, but we have similar like go-to structures that are common to ADHD. And so many of the times, our brains are not functioning well with like simplistic moral narratives like this try harder, be more responsible, or if you cared, you would bullshit. Our brains are very much state dependent, they are context dependent. And so desire in ADHD is not just going to be about attraction, it's then also about bandwidth. It's about the nervous system regulation, the different needs and stimulation, your executive function, whether your brain can access the pathway from the you want it to then you can initiate to then you can stay present to then you can tolerate any sensory experience and then maintain the fucking arousal. That has nothing to do with romance. That is all neurobiology. So, when people hear me talk about capacity, they sometimes then want to turn that into an excuse or a moral failing. And I need people to know their place here because capacity isn't an excuse. It's just not. It isn't a crime. It's fucking reality. And ADHD relationships that ignore reality are not thriving. They are going to implode. They do implode. Now, where does perimenopause and menopause fall into this? Well, the way these topics end up then being excluded from mainstream desire discourse. I don't know if embarrassing is the right word, but that's the only word that's coming to my mind right now. Because when we look at perimenopause and menopause, these aren't actually niche issues. They're not fucking rare. We're all going through them. They are a standard human female biology for many people. And yet people talk about long-term desire as if the body is just going to behave like it's 26 forever with this unlimited estrogen and zero stress and no sensory changes and no sleep deprivation and no caregiving load. Fuck, I wish, right? That is not how it works. Hormones aren't fucking vibes. They are chemistry. And chemistry impacts hormones, chemistry. They impact the arousal, the lubrication, the orgasm, the sensitivity that you're experiencing, your mood, your sleep, your anxiety, irritability, focus, executive function, emotional regulation, stress tolerance. That's a lot, right? And so when women start entering perimenopause and then get to menopause, for many of them, desire doesn't just simply go away. It just becomes harder to access. And the pathway then becomes more fragile. It becomes more context dependent. It becomes more vulnerable to the stress, the resentment, the sensory overload. And if you have ADHD already, it can feel like your entire system got turned down in one area, while then your stress response got turned up in 12. So yes, there are interventions. There are hormonal options. There are medical routes, therapy routes, relationship redesign options. There are things a person can explore to increase desire access. And if someone wants that, if they want to find their desire again, if they miss it, if they feel disconnected from it, if they, feel like something got blocked, then yes, it is absolutely going to be their responsibility to explore that. Of course it is. If you want something and you have capacity, you have agency to pursue it. But here's actually what people keep refusing to tolerate. It's the if she doesn't want to, that is also her choice. And it's not automatically a moral failure. And this is where I'm going to sound like a broken record because apparently it needs fucking repeating. I do not believe a man should have to accept less sex if that's not what he wants or needs in a relationship. I'm not here to tell anyone that they should stay unhappy. I sure as hell am not here to tell anyone that they should settle or that sex isn't important. Sex is important for many people. Sex is a form of connection for many people. It's an emotional bonding for many people. It's regulation. All of that is fucking real. But what is also real is that sometimes two people's needs cannot be met at the same time. And when that becomes the case, the issue isn't who is wrong. The issue is all about compatibility, the fit, the viability. That's the adult version of this conversation. The child version, however, of it is someone needs to change so I can feel okay. The adult version is looking at, can we build a system that's going to work for both of us? And if not, what are we going to do about that? Now, let's talk about the phrase that keeps getting thrown around incorrectly: weaponized incompetence. Because I am watching people use this like a gotcha. Weaponized incompetence has a meaning. It's when a person pretends that they can't do something they absolutely can do so that someone else will do it for them, so that they can then avoid the responsibility. It's a strategy. It assumes capacity exists. It assumes the skill can be learned and that effort is being then avoided. So, laundry, it's a skill. Dishes, skill. Scheduling, skill. Learning how to initiate is a fucking skill. Emotional communication is a skill. You want to know what's not a fucking skill? Sexual desire, my friends. Sexual desire is a state. It is a biopsychosocial, nervous system dependent state. And while there are behaviors and conditions that can support desire, you cannot command desire like a task. You cannot treat arousal like a to-do list. You cannot moralize someone's hormonal reality into them having this like internal personality character flaw. So when people end up then labeling fluctuating desire as weaponized incompetence, what they're actually doing is moralizing physiology. They're turning capacity limits into a story about what? Laziness, manipulation, failure? And that right there is not clinically accurate. And it is not relationally helpful either. Now, can people weaponize, I am stressed or my hormones as a way to avoid intimacy they don't want? Sure. People can weaponize anything. People can weaponize therapy language, mental health language, ADHD language, trauma language. It happens all the time. But the existence of people misusing a concept doesn't mean we should respond by then assuming that every person with low desire is just avoiding effort. That's exactly how we get coercion disguised as accountability. So what does accountability then look like here, right? Well, it's definitely not going to be any form of blame, pressure, you need to fix your fucking libido. Accountability, it looks like honesty and collaboration. For the, higher desire partner, accountability might be naming your needs very clearly. Maybe regulating any form of disappointment that comes into play. Not treating access like a guarantee. It's also being completely honest about maybe deal breakers without then turning them into forms of threats. And when you look at somebody who maybe is experiencing the lower or fluctuating desire, accountability is being honest about your fucking capacity and the willingness that you hold. Are you open to exploring change? Do you want more desire? Are you shut down? Are you anxious, resentful, disconnected, overstimulated, in pain? Do you feel safe? Do you feel pressured? Do you feel like intimacy is just another task someone now expects you to perform? And after all that, the hardest part is, can you meet each other's needs? Do you want to? And is this then realistically possible? Sometimes that answer is yes. And then it's going to require system redesigns. It's going to require maybe scheduling things differently, reducing any type of cognitive load. Medical support maybe is going to be needed. Maybe you're going to need to throw in some novelty, sensuality, forms of stimulation changes. Maybe it's going to require better foreplay and better pacing, whatever that looks like for you. And, it's maybe going to require the higher desire partner learning how to not make the lower desire partner feel like a fucking broken appliance if you're choosing that this is what you want. It maybe requires the lower desire partner learning how to communicate your limits without disappearing. It requires teamwork. And here's me being the Debbie Downer. And I get it. People do not want to hear this part, but sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes a person is not able to do this. Sometimes the body cannot produce what the other partner wants. That is just the reality, where the mismatch is way too wide. And sometimes the resentment is too high. The life stage, not compatible with maybe the sexual expectations. Sometimes one partner is going to want to explore and the other has absolutely zero interest. Sometimes one partner is going to be willing to work and the other is not. And, when that's the case, the ethical move is not going to be pressure. It isn't going to be shaming. It isn't coercion dressed up as helping. The ethical move is honesty and, unfortunately, mutual separation. Not because anyone in this picture or story is bad, but because the relationship is just not viable. And I also got to say this part very clearly, because staying in a relationship that's not going to be able to meet both people's needs while pretending it just is eventually going to go back, man, that creates cruelty. It creates years of resentment, contempt, repeated rupture. It creates like a slow emotional death by 1,000 fucking paper cuts. People deserve better than that. Both partners do. And this is why I keep saying, education before commitment would save people so many years of pain. People commit assuming like access to sex is just going to be this consistent forever, without understanding how predictable it is that bodies end up changing. And if you do not want to be in a relationship where desire fluctuates, where hormones are shifting, where perimenopause impacts access, where maybe stress is going to affect arousal, or where ADHD affects the initiation and presence, all valid. I'm not judging you. I don't think you're a bad person. But then you need to be honest about what you are signing up for. You need to ask the deeper questions before commitment. You need to assess compatibility like an adult, not like someone just hoping chemistry is going to do the work for you. That's not how this works. And yes, not all women, by the way, experience desire drops. Some women experience desire increases. Some women feel better sexually as they age. They feel more liberated, less anxious, more confident. You want to know why? Bodies vary, context varies, the nervous systems vary, which is why my disclaimers across all social media exist. Because some people hear one dynamic and then immediately end up treating it like it's this universal law. It's not. It's a pattern that shows up often enough that it deserves the discussion, especially when it intersects with ADHD and perimenopause, which is the work I do, amongst other things. So, if you've made it this point and you've been listening and to any of this, and you're thinking, okay, but what do I do with this? The bottom line here is nobody is wrong for what they want. Nobody is wrong for what their body can or can't do. But the relationship has to then be built on the reality, not expectation. You either collaborate and redesign in a way that's going to meet both of your needs, or you're going to have to learn to accept that it doesn't work and you stop forcing it to. You can have high desire and still be a respectful partner. You can have fluctuating desire and still be a committed partner. The issue isn't who wants more. The issue is whether you can build a system that's going to honor both people without shaming each other. And if you can't, that's not failure. Again, that is information. And I just thought, before I even wrap this up, I do need to say what I think ends up getting lost in the internet version of these conversations a lot, that there is absolutely no one-stop approach to supporting your experience. I'm sorry. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this is what gets people starting to move. Self-help books totally can be helpful for education. If you go straight to the science, again, helpful for education. Content like this episode and, the ones that I share on my social media, all of that helpful for language and perspective. But you and your partner are not generic humans. You're you. You bring your own layers. Your partner brings their layers. And then on top of that, you within your layers are bringing the history, the stress, the hormones, the nervous system patterns, ADHD traits, trauma responses, relationship dynamics, attachment injuries, beliefs about sex, shame, resentment, all of it. And sometimes those layers have to be addressed before you can even get to the main event conversation about desire. And this is exactly why I tell people on social media and even people who end up meeting me in real life that I can't give you specific advice. It would be so fucking unethical for me to just say, do this, you'll be good. Because I don't know your relationship. I don't know your health or your exact context. And I don't know what's driving maybe your shutdown or your pressure or your mismatch. There are a million reasons people get stuck. And if you don't identify the right ones, you're going to keep trying solutions that feel like effort, but then don't actually change anything. And I'll be completely honest, this is why, writing my book has been so fucking hard, because I'm not writing a book that can just solve your problems. It can't. No book can. And it can't be a perfectly personalized roadmap to your final destination. What it can be is a foundational start. It can give you the information you need to maybe understand why you might be stuck, why your desire might not be accessible, maybe why your, nervous system might be bracing, or why your partner, might be spiraling, and why the same conversations keep going nowhere. And if you and your partner have, too many barriers, or the walls are up from maybe too much resentment, too much shutdown, too much defensiveness, unspoken rules, working with someone who can tease apart those layers might actually be your key to getting that momentum. And it's not because you're broken, your relationship's broken, or you're failing, or that you failed, but because sometimes you cannot fucking DIY your way through a dynamic that has years of fucking reinforcement behind it. And that, my friends, is the fucking ADHD and peri reality. Thanks for hanging out with me on ADHD Realities. Hit that subscribe button and share it with a friend who gets it. And always remember, your brain isn't the enemy. Work with it and not against it. Until next time, everyone, be well.